everybody, this is Tony.
And this is Paul. We're coming at you from the Friends for Life podcast, where we discuss the ongoing lives and issues of people with developmental disabilities to spark positive change in the field.
And we have a lot of fun doing it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Friends for Life podcast. Thanks for tuning back in. If you can, help us out, go down below, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you'd like to come work here with us at Friends for Life, head over to friendsforliferc.com. Click on the employment page tab, fill out the form. We'll get back with you. Today, our special guest is Jennifer Wolfe. She's from the Lucas County Trauma Informed Care Coalition, and that's a lot to say, but we have a ton of awesome stuff for you, including what trauma-informed care is, some solutions on how to deal with trauma, and how trauma affects disabilities, how COVID has affected people with trauma. It's an awesome conversation, and we're really glad to have it. So let's dive right into it. All right, so Jennifer, welcome to the Friends for Life podcast. I personally want to apologize for giving you the wrong address to get here.
Yes, everyone. She had to swim here. She was all the way in the ocean from the address that Paul gave.
I apologize for that. But welcome, and I hope we're having a good afternoon. It's a wonderful day today, and we're here to talk about the Lucas County Trauma Informed Care Coalition. Did I get it right?
You did. Awesome.
Good job.
Gold star. There you go.
Did something right for once today. So how are you doing today?
I'm great. Yeah.
Feeling good?
Yeah. Glad to be here. It's beautiful outside. So.
Ready for these temperatures to take a little plummet here
Absolutely.
For a little bit?
Yes.
The worst part about that is, unfortunately, is at the expense of people down south. Man, right now, big, warm hearts and prayers to those who are dealing with the hurricane situation. If you are a avid donator of anything, or if you are just trying to help people, please get with your local folks to try to help where you can down there. If you can donate some monetary ways, or even with love and appreciation. So, sorry, just wanted to...
No, I agree wholeheartly. Lots of trauma going on.
Yes, okay. I can imagine. So speaking of trauma, trauma-informed care, what's the point of the coalition? Like, how are you guys working towards something, or what are you guys working towards in general?
So we, I should have brought our mission statement, but basically we are an organization, just grassroots. Most of us have other jobs within social service agencies or whatever in the community, but we've come together to work towards education, towards networking, providing resources and referral for people who have experienced trauma. So.
And what would those resources be in general for someone who's, maybe whether they have a disability or not, if they're looking to get some help in that capacity? Because trauma has huge lasting effects on people, like lifetime, and it can cause a lot of serious issues. So what kind of programs and services are you offering?
Well, the majority of our time is spent in education and training. A lot of agencies, we also train agencies to do their own trainings for their own staff. So refresher trainings, staff turnover, orientation, that kind of thing, as well as networking within, what does Toledo and Lucas County have to offer? Which therapists and agencies are trauma-informed? Schools. We work with emergency responders. We work, just anybody who's willing to listen. Faith communities, anyone. So
awesome. And with this being in the disability field, and Tony and I were kind of talking about this a little bit before you got here, is, there's a lot of dual diagnosis with people with disabilities, and they also have, other issues that are going on, and they often deal with trauma. It's unfortunately, just because of the stigma maybe associated with the disability or something like that. So how can something like the Trauma Informed Care Coalition help people with disabilities?
Well, we actually kind of grew out of a joint effort between down in Columbus, between the mental health and the DD at the state level. Back in 2014, they put on the first trauma summit in the summer of 2014 and brought together, realizing that we serve a lot of the same people in the mental health and the DD system. And so how can we better serve, and how can we serve them and identify what's going on rather than just labeling and trying to work around it, really get down to the basis of what's causing a lot of trauma, or a lot of behaviors and a lot of mental health diagnoses come back to trauma. And so that trauma summit brought together hundreds of people from across the state. Then regional work groups grew out of that. And then, so some of us who attended that original trauma summit started the coalition here in Toledo in the spring of 15. So we've been going for 6 years now, and grown, and, just invited partners who, also feel like this is really important for everyone to hear. So, the mental health and DD crossover really was identified at the state level. And I think Ohio is doing a lot of good work. We're one of the states that is leading the way, and having at least identifying that and trying to work together in the two systems.
I've said this in the past, on other episodes, of how it's strange how Northwest Ohio and Toledo specifically become like this hub for like advancing the disabilities field, and it's really there's a lot of stuff happening all at once, and I don't get enough news from other areas to know if that's true or not, what I'm saying, but it sounds good, and I like the way it's going.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. With mental health, that's a huge topic nowadays. Like, that's not something I remember ever hearing about as a kid, even growing up in like the 90s and early 2000s or whatever. It's like you don't hear about mental health.
You need to grow up where I grew up, because they had another word for it.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Everybody, I think, tries to simplify things. And growing up, you actually had names for people: Crazy Joe, Crazy Ed, and one of the gentlemen on my block, his name was Crazy Dale, and outstanding guy. And I remember hearing stories about him, like he used to be a doctor and all of this, and then he took drugs, and it had done it, but. With me saying that, have you noticed anything of, like, any commonalities, like, nowadays, not only in our field, but through the mental health side of things that you're seeing more often than not? Is there any kind of data or research being done to try to, narrow or filter out how mental illness is being perceived?
Well, I think there is a lot of work behind, kind of breaking the stigma, I guess, if that's kind of what you're going with. You're right. A lot of slang has been used over, us growing up or in your neighborhoods or whatever. But people knew that whoever it was, the Crazy Dale, had issues, right? And so now I hope that people are a little more curious, a little more compassionate about what happened. And so that's kind of one of trauma-informed care's like key phrases. Instead of what's wrong with that person, what happened to them? It's so much more compassionate to look through that lens. What happened that led to, maybe them having a psychotic break, maybe them needing to numb with drugs and alcohol, making some choices that are risky, but gave them a dose of, happy hormones and happy chemicals in their brain instead of sadness period. And,
Right.
The stigma, I think, NAMI of Greater Toledo does a lot of work around breaking stigma, and they're a partner in the Trauma Coalition as well. But, I think it's all of us, maybe changing the way we phrase things. And we all laugh, and I have too, about, these names, but names they can hurt people. And
Definitely.
The way that we phrase things and refer to things makes an impact for good or bad. So.
And well, I was more kind of like trying to work to the point of like mental health in the aspect you're talking about. It's stigmatized, until it's still stigmatized in a lot of ways, but I haven't heard much about fixing it until recently, I guess, because in the past it was all, like you said, it was just like, this dude's weird. Like you'd see someone downtown acting all strung out or whatever, and you're like, oh, weirdo freak. But nowadays we're working towards like, what happened to this person to make it that way, and what can we do to help? And I think that's growing in the public eye a lot, because I hear the term mental health like daily.
Well, this is very, very amazing too, because I think it's happening because of not only A, social media, but B, it's happening to the people that we look at and think they have the best lives ever. Still to this day, I am tripped out about Robin Williams. That could be anyone. If it could be Robin Williams, it could be anyone. Because he was like the definition of what I looked at as of what happiness is. A happy-go-lucky, jolly guy. And just even with myself, losing someone so near and dear to me just recently, and to be able to see how it affected me and the way that my day-to-days were handled. It's a big deal. And so your work is not going to go unnoticed, or the coalition's work.
Yeah. I think, to your point, social media can be used for good or bad. In some ways, it's given a platform for normalizing these struggles that even Robin Williams and your favorite YouTuber and whoever, they don't have a perfect life. We kind of hear that people put their highlight reel on Instagram, right?
Absolutely.
But what's going on behind the scenes? And so maybe some people are willing to risk showing the bad side and say to all their viewers, you know what, I have bad days too. I go to therapy, and that's okay. And that should be celebrated. That should be, applauded, that you're taking care of yourself. And I think also the internet can be used for getting validation, maybe asking those questions that you're too afraid to ask. Or go seek out a counselor, but you start to get some answers online, so that can be helpful. So maybe we're moving in the right direction in some ways.
Yeah. Do you guys offer any help in helping? Listen to me. I'm repeating word after word. Do you offer any help in locating those kind of assistance for people?
More like word of mouth. We've had, it's kind of, we have to be careful, whether we're not approving or giving our stamp of approval.
Gotcha.
But we have, partners in the coalition that by word of mouth can kind of share. Of course, it's still up to folks to reach out to, maybe an agency that has therapists that are trauma-informed. I mean, really, it's become more of a standard now. I mean, I think every agency in Lucas County that I know of, mental health agencies, do trauma-informed care, seek out trauma-informed therapists who at least have a basic understanding of how it changes the brain, how it can change the body, and how there are pathways for healing and recovery.
So I want to step back to like the base level of this. When you say someone is a trauma-informed therapist, what exactly kind of does that insinuate about them? But then just seeing a regular old therapist that you get a referral from your doctor. So is there a separation?
Well, it could include credentials and extra schooling that they've taken. I would say at the base level, it's that this person works with the understanding that events that we've gone through can impact us and have those lasting effects, and that they're going to look and work with their clients through that lens, with empathy and compassion, and also understanding that you and I could be in the exact same traumatic event, but it could be traumatic for me, and you move on and you're fine, because we all have different coping mechanisms. We have different life histories. We have different sets of resilience skills, and maybe I haven't been taught how to deal, or maybe I've already had that same situation happen to me a year ago. So this is like a cumulative effect, and you're like, hey, it was a car accident, we'll move on. And I'm like, oh, I'm not driving again, So really, I guess the therapists, they can do extra training on their own. But like I said, I think basically every mental health agency in Lucas County for sure is doing standard training. A lot of, the colleges are now teaching trauma classes. They didn't when I was going to school. I mean, we talked about PTSD, but it was more like veterans, Now it's like, oh, anybody could have PTSD, really. I mean, if you think about it. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in the inner city who go through that. I think a lot of folks don't understand when you grow up around a whole lot of violence and a lot of structures that are not the same as everyone else. Once you're somewhere else, it is very tough. I remember the first time because I live more in an agricultural surrounding, but the first time that I slept out in Swanton, it was too quiet. It was, I used to stay close to downtown Toledo, so I was used to St. V's helicopter and, you know, all of these different things, sirens, all kind of stuff. And to have nothing. So now I listen to the fan.
It's funny you say that because I'm just reading this book right now where this guy is talking about how there's like been a huge difference of, you know, the way the world operates in the last few hundred years, basically starting with the Industrial Revolution and how a lot of people, like humans, transition from basically living in small little areas and maybe like little communities out in the middle of nowhere, and it's relatively quiet, and now we live in these cities where there's just a wall of noise 24/7. They said most people have never actually experienced silence. And there's this
and the light pollution
too, but he specifically was talking about how people nowadays don't know how to just be bored and exist in like real time. And he was saying how a lot of people, there's this room that it's the quietest place on earth. It's like so quiet that you can hear your blood flowing.
Wow.
And he said like a lot of people have like an existential crisis in this room because they've never experienced just sitting with nothing and quiet. Because you think about it, you're in your car, you're constantly scoping out what's happening, you're listening to the radio, you're doing everything but thinking with your brain. You're just and then we do that all day. We have headphones, we have YouTube, we have Facebook. So, you know, that could potentially, I mean, I'm getting to a point here, I promise. That could potentially, I would say, affect trauma in a worse way. Think about it, because instead of dealing with that trauma, you're actually just distracting yourself to not deal with it. So what are some of the like effects of trauma that could really, you know, make people feel kind of like helpless sometimes? Because I think that's what happens with depression and trauma and things like that. People just end up feeling dead and helpless and they can't do anything with that. So
Right. That's a lot.
yeah, sorry.
Wow.
The main question
it's all
is
good.
trauma.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I feel like a lot of us, whether it's a traumatic response specifically, we numb out with our distractions, whether it's our cell phones, TV, the radio, and we get uncomfortable in silence and having to deal and feel, you know. But to answer your question, I think the trauma responses kind of all grow out of fight, flight, freeze, right? So fight, aggression, you know, argumentative, you know, it could look a lot of different ways. Flight could be avoidance. It could be hypervigilance. You might see people who want to stand, you know, in the corner to be able to see the entrance all the time. Jumpiness. It could be, you know, numbing out, right? So the freeze response is kind of like they're not really there, you know. You can't really get folks to engage, whether that's clients, whether it's us and our coworkers, you know. Anybody could be going through anything. And right now we've got COVID going on, which is a worldwide traumatic event. I mean, really, everybody is affected to some extent.
This is the only thing that I've ever seen, and I guess all of us, that has affected every part of our life in every section. And nobody was safe from it unless you're maybe in the Amazon and you just haven't left.
Right, yeah.
Have you seen a boost in trauma, just like numbers of people, anything across the board when COVID happened? Because like it's been, that book also touched on that. It's like none of us have ever experienced anything like this. We thought like, oh yeah, we're in the 2000s, all this is over, we got medicine, we're good, and then something like this happens. Never in my lifetime would I have thought something like this. Maybe an asteroid, but not this. I don't know, like this is almost worse, I feel like. It's dragging out. So is there an increase that you've seen, or anyone at the coalition?
Oh sure. And I mean the statistics, you know, nationwide for sure bear that out. I mean, unfortunately, there's huge increases in diagnoses of anxiety and depression and suicide attempts, suicide completions. I mean, it's hard. People are really struggling. Kids are struggling. Last year, the school, you know, situation was so hard for so many. Hard for the parents too, who maybe are trying to whatever. Maybe daycare's closed, they're trying to work. Maybe they're working remotely with kids in the school, in home, trying to do schooling. I mean, it was a hot mess. But definitely, you know, we are seeing increases. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's kind of alarming. I think I saw an article this morning actually about, it was one of the bigger newspapers, and they're all a little biased in one way or the other. So it's like whatever. But I think it says something like almost every single American or every single person living in the United States is some form of depression currently. Like, wait, and you're talking like 100%.
100% of people.
100%. That's wild. They said
Yeah.
it's due to COVID, essentially, because there's so many factors going on right now, but especially with people who have disabilities, like they're already kind of limited in a lot of ways with who they can interact with, especially if there's someone who's bedridden. They have staff, they have family, and a lot of time they don't have that. And then with COVID happening and shortage of workers and people leaving, I can only imagine it's just incredibly traumatic and just taking a situation that's not great to begin with and making it worse. So have you seen any sort of hope coming with how things are slowly opening back up, or is it just kind of like more of the same with, because we're riding these waves. It's like open, close, mask, no mask, this, like, so. I don't know what to say at this point.
I think it's too early to tell for sure. I think that, summertime weather and opening things up makes people feel more hopeful. I am hopeful, optimistic, cautiously that, we could have, last winter, I think, was a dark time for a lot of people, and so I sure don't want a repeat, and nobody else does either. No. I think that there are some people and agencies out there that are really looking outside the box, or, for ways to try and engage people. Again, the whole social media thing and technology has been a blessing to a lot of people who wouldn't have been able to connect with friends or family otherwise, felt so shut in, especially over the winter time. So, I think we look at a lot of, looking at remote supports and technology to try and fill some of the gaps. Sometimes that's actually a blessing in disguise. It definitely is a help, could be staffing-wise, but also sometimes people get along better not having
somebody in their
a
face
body in
24/7.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yes.
And so, that could be, we're being forced to look at things in a different way, which is, can be good and bad.
Yeah. Well, with that, because we always speak to people who have a very vast background, and sometimes it is not in the DD field. So how did you get into the DD field? Like, what was your calling or your epiphany moment?
Oh.
Some of us are just, like myself, people have heard my story a million times, but I was kind of born into this, I feel like. But was there anything special?
I don't know that I had an epiphany moment, but I think it was a natural fit for me. I did grow up with a sister with a disability. So I'm the oldest of four. She's 2 years younger than me, and we're very close. But I didn't set out to go into the DD field, at least consciously. I did go into social work. I got my bachelor's degree, came back home, worked in residential, for significantly emotionally disturbed youth.
Okay.
Then I worked in some school settings, and later on went and got my master's degree, worked in school settings again, and then when I moved to Ohio, got a job with the Board of DD. And anyway, so and it was definitely something that was on my area of interest. I had worked in a DD agency in another state as well, but it wasn't like, oh, this is where I have to work. But it is a natural fit. Social work allows you to work in a lot of different settings, from schools, hospitals, social service agencies, mental health, of course. But yeah, so here I am.
And you know what? And I love that, and that you mentioned that, because I think our field of work is one of the best things that you can do and still do other things. Like, you can actually learn more tasks and skills doing this type of work and just being a good person, than if you actually went and did 4 to 6 years of schooling sometimes. Like, it can really be a transformation mentally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, having getting to do new tasks even within your same field is refreshing. And there's a high burnout in any social service field, social workers. I heard some scary statistic yesterday, like 60,000 social workers a year are leaving the field. No, don't leave.
Because we see it in every corner right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to work in a field where you're giving and working with hurting people, right? And that can lead to secondary traumatic stress, right? So if you're working with somebody who is hurting and you hear their story, it takes a toll on you. Yeah. And so that self-care thing that we hear all the time is really important. You know, compassion fatigue is a real thing where sometimes you're just like, I can't feel anymore. Like,
I am so happy that you brought, because I've been working with a couple of people and I'm trying to get it so I can find a way to finance it. But I believe a lot of our DSPs need counseling. I think that they should have counseling, and I believe it is the right of the agency provider to offer them that resource. How important do you think that is?
Oh, incredibly important. When I started learning about trauma and, you know, what that looks like in individuals that we serve, the next thing that they said was also in staff. And whether that's, you know, me, my coworkers, DSPs, whomever, we've all experienced stuff and we can get triggered. And get on a little soapbox about this, but we're asking DSPs to do one of the hardest jobs, and maybe they have their own trauma and they're going into a setting with somebody who's been traumatized. And so what is the likelihood that one of them is not going to inadvertently push another better? It could be a trauma trigger. It could be power and control.
I have a very good story about that. It's a short one, so everyone will be happy. Look, pause over here like, oh God, here he goes. No, but I was working with an individual, and my mother passed some time ago. And when she passed, it was roughly 4 years ago. She actually passed on my birthday. Oh, wow. But this individual was very disrespectful and blatantly disrespectful to his mother. And within a few months of my mother passing and going through this, I didn't realize how much I disliked him doing these things. Now, I think I handled it pretty good, but it was not as smooth as I would normally handle a situation. I held my composure enough to not get on the abuser registry or anything like that.
Glad to hear that.
But I did say some things, and I was hurt by it because the mom was just there to try to help. That's all she was doing. And you MF this, every explicit bit of language possible. But I felt that trauma. So, and here I am, an executive at a company, like only telling a DSP, it's okay, he doesn't mean it. It's not always the approach or the appropriate answer to that dilemma.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And we don't always know what's going to push our buttons, you know? And it could be, we've had situations where it could be the perfume that I wear reminds an individual, but can they even tell me that?
Right.
Or, there's sometimes, have you ever just found yourself irritated with somebody? You can't even put your finger on it, but it could be.
All the time.
I was going to say, that's natural for Paul.
Right. No. What if that's a trauma trigger?
Right.
But, just giving them some education that this could be, and maybe the permission to take a timeout, if they're finding themselves like a DSP really getting their buttons pushed and not running, not feeling like the situation's getting better. Maybe they can tag team out with another staff if that's possible. Or, but as far as therapy, if you think about DSPs, generally speaking, unfortunately, don't get paid near what they're worth. So they are already dealing, maybe, I know a lot of them personally that are working a couple jobs.
Yep.
They're struggling, and maybe they have their own trauma, whatever that might be. That's a lot to juggle for any human being. I think if we were able to offer therapy to DSPs, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, very needed.
Another task
that
I am
Is there a grant out there that's got to be like,
and that's exactly what I'm looking for.
trauma, mental health funding.
Come on, people, ladies and gentlemen, if anyone knows of anything like this that we are oblivious to, please send us the information, either on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's a lot of it's hard to take in a lot of this stuff too currently because there's so many things happening right now all the time, and like there's it. I personally feel like no matter what I do and how much I try to like level out, there's always like 100,000 things coming at once.
Yeah.
And you know, at what point do a society that's driven based off a lot of money and not so much time and stuff like that, when do we all kind of sit back and go like, all right, is this like the best plan of action? Because like collectively, everyone seems to be having a bad time. When do we kind of like? When are we going to kind of take? When are we going to kind of be like, yeah, maybe we need to chill a little bit on how fast everything moves all the time? Because you know we don't have to be on our phones 27, or we don't have to work 80 hours a week. Realistically, we choose those things sometimes. So, with trauma informed care and what you guys are doing with the coalition, how does a coalition work? This might sound like a dumb question because I personally don't really know. I'm very new to the field, so I'm like still learning a lot of the things that are going on. So like, what's the difference between like a coalition or some sort of nonprofit that's out there, or is it kind of more regulated by the state, or how does that work?
Well, we are very informal. We are not funded at all. We're just
a group of people.
Just a group of people whose bosses let us get together the first Tuesday of every month, support us to have that time. And right now we've been meeting virtually for the past year. And we sometimes we have speakers come in. Sometimes we share trainings, new resources we've found. We have subcommittees working on some specific projects. And we just, kind of do what feels natural in response to what's going on. Last year, we spent a lot of time focusing our meetings on, racial trauma and cultural and generational and community traumas. Supporting in light of what was going on nationally. And so focusing and supporting our education efforts in that way. Kind of like you talked about with, when you grow up in a certain community, that affects you for good or bad, or both. And so I think in addition to car accidents or abuse and neglect, these chronic trauma situations are being looked at a lot more. So intergenerational poverty, racism, historical events like the Holocaust, and how there's scientific evidence in the genes of the descendants, how that changed them at a molecular level. I mean, it's amazing stuff.
Yeah, I've done some research on it, and it's like I tried to tell my wife about the fight gene, or that. Now I know I am how I am. Because even going back to us never checking out. That's not how I handle stress. I typically handle stress by adding more to my plate. So I guess in a sense, so I don't have to sit there and just replay it over and over again. Because my personal opinion is it's not going to get me anywhere. It's not going to change the outcome of what just happened. So either I can make the situation better, or I can not complain about it and move on. But again, is that the healthiest way to handle it? I'm not here to say. Maybe my therapist will tell me something different, everyone.
Well, it's so interesting because that fight, flight, freeze thing we've got going on in our brains, we can't really choose that. That happens in a split second. Our brains choose for us. And then they continue to choose that same whatever worked before and kept us safe. Maybe in an argument with our spouse, the brain is still like, do this, So, I mean, I'm not saying we can never change ourselves at all, but when it gets down to that, it's a reaction. It's not necessarily a choice. And I think it does affect us, maybe in your coping strategy, Tony, when things feel stressful, you're a doer. You're like, I got to fight this. I got to take on these tasks and get them done. Someone else might be like, I got to check out and go watch Netflix and no shame on them. It's just different ways of coping. It's pretty interesting.
And I see that quite a bit. I'm surrounded by people who are doers. So a lot of the time, it's like what Tony said is you just envelop yourself in more work to stay busy, and I'm guilty of that as well. Instead of I'm with Tony on this one. I'm the guy who, like, for example, last night 2 a.m. no reason, woke up, and I just was like, well, I guess I'll work for a few more hours.
This is why we get along so well, really. We think the same way when it comes to a lot of those things.
And so with stuff like that, and I would be willing to argue, that a lot of this comes from the culture of America as well, as we're very much ingrained in our culture, is especially with this might sound uninformed or bad, but like, especially as males, you grow up and you're said, deal with it. That's all. There's no like, oh, how are you feeling? It's deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's finally coming to a head where people, especially maybe even my generation and younger, are starting to be more along the lines of like, maybe I don't have to just shut up and live with this. Maybe I can like do something to figure it out. So are you seeing more of that, as well as people are more open about talking about trauma? Like, or is it just, I don't know. It's very difficult because this is something that gets hidden a lot. Yeah.
I actually just saw a recent post on social media somewhere, one of the trauma pages I follow, and it was addressing just that. It was saying society rewards certain trauma responses. Like, we think highly of overachievers, workaholics. I mean, we say, oh, you shouldn't work so much. Yeah. But then we like, oh, look at how much they've accomplished. Right. And society in general doesn't always allow or allot time off. Going on vacation means you got more work to do before and after to prepare for it. And, we work 40 hours at least, and whatever. So, I think that there are some people who are now like identifying this as, it could be a trauma response. And is this the healthiest way? And are there other things we can reward? Can we reward a person who has good home-life balance, or work-life balance? Can we adjust expectations?
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very tough way to look at it, because I know I have done it many a times that I think about it, and you try, especially in our field, because healthcare is just so different from so many other things. Like, if I was on a factory line somewhere, yes, I can see that argument. If I was even on the front line at Burger King or something, I can see that argument. It's just when it comes to healthcare, the only true way of success I've ever seen is being compassionate enough to go above and beyond. It's like, I even tell all my supervisors and anybody in the executive position at Friends for Life, it's the days that everybody else gets off that you're going to have to work the hardest. It's all those holidays, field trips, special occasions, stuff like that. A concert with somebody coming in, like when the Kiss concert came. Oh, we had at least 3 or 4 call-offs. I was going to call you and see if you wanted to go too. Oh. But I ended up not going. And shout outs to them, because they're dealing with COVID right now. I just saw, so prayers to Kiss. I know Paul likes that one.
Oh my gosh, I never thought I'd see that one. Yeah, so it's already pushing the time we said we'd finish, so I don't want to keep you for too long. But let's do something we haven't got to do in a few episodes, Tony.
Yeah. Rapid fire.
Yikes.
So if you're familiar with our podcast, we have Rapid Fire. It's a list of questions that are set to the would you rather. So the very first one for you, since we've kind of talked about it earlier, would you rather have to work an entire week without internet or phone?
Phone.
Look, that was easy. I would have picked the same thing. But actually, I probably would have did internet, because that kind of includes my phone sometimes.
I wouldn't be able to work at all if I didn't have internet. So, internet.
Would you rather lose your vision in a room full of porcupines, or lose your hearing during a possible tornado? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's deep. Because you won't be able to hear those sirens.
I guess hearing.
Hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, you could always just go in the basement and wait it out.
I'm starting to think you have trauma from your phone. Because you
Right.
chose two options that involved you not having to use a phone anymore.
Look, that's what working
That's
at home
psychoanalyze
does,
me
right?
here.
Nice, simple one. But would you rather, for the rest of your life, have to, for entertainment, read books or watch movies?
I would like to say read books, but I watch a lot of movies.
There you go. Because
I
you can make
yeah.
a book into a movie.
Yeah.
I would pick books.
You would.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you hate TV and you stare in front of a screen.
I don't
all the
hate
time.
TV. I just spend 90% of my time
in
looking
front
at
of the
your
screen.
face, and I don't want to see any more things on a TV screen.
Oh, wow. Well,
But,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for coming in and you came in on short notice, and we very much appreciate it.
Yes,
and
thank
had a
you.
very good, awesome points that I think are very important for people to hear nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So, why don't you let people know before we wrap up here where they can learn more about the Trauma Informed Care Coalition? Oh, I
Very
remember.
good. Yeah. So thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation. For more information, we have a Facebook page, Lucas County Trauma Informed Care Coalition. We have an Instagram account as well, obviously, and a website with a blog. And we post resources. We post a calendar, invites to our Zoom for now meetings. First Tuesday of the month, we meet. And we all are welcome to join. Even if you can't make it every month, you're certainly welcome. We have speakers occasionally. Just try and make it relevant and helpful to whatever agencies. It doesn't have to be specifically mental health or social services, faith-based, again, EMT, anything. So we just want to spread the word, help people kind of think through that trauma lens when they're approaching people. Think about what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you.
Perfect. That's beautiful.
Important work. So
Yeah.
thank you for everything that you do.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this episode of the Friends for Life podcast. Before you go, if you could help us out, hit that subscribe button down below. We'd really appreciate that. Also, you can listen to this podcast on the podcasting platform of your choice. All you got to do is look Friends for Life podcast up if you want to watch it on YouTube. Also, we're right here as always. We want to thank Jennifer for coming on and just having an awesome conversation about trauma. It's something that's really stigmatized, but it's getting a little bit more open to talk about nowadays. And for us, that's a great thing. We hope that you guys got something out of this, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you next week.